for being here in this session. My name is Jimena Velez, and I'm one of the co-organizers of this session with my colleague and friend Reynaldo Linares. We're both from the Center for Conservation and Sustainability of the Smithsonian Institution, and we're also representing a local NGO in Peru that is called Asociación Peruana para la Conservación de la Naturaleza. And another colleague, a co-organizer, is Jorge Ahumada from Wildmont and Wildlife Insights. We've been discussing a lot about this session. And so today, the organization of this is we're going to have 4 presentations. 2 of them are going to be virtual, and 2 of them are going to be in person. And after that, we're going to have a roundtable with questions. And we have invited 2 additional people, that it's Ricardo Ortiz and Angélica Pulido. Thank you very much for joining us. And we're going to have 4 burning questions that we want to address with the speakers, our invitees, and also if you can weigh in with your insights and your experiences, more than welcome. So to start, it's going to be, as I said, a hybrid session, and it's going to be in Spanish and English. So if you haven't scanned the QR code, you should do it at some point, and we know that it's working very good. So to start, I'm going to give the word to Reynaldo and Jorge, who are going to give us an introduction to this session, and then we will continue with the speakers and their presentations. Thank you very much, and welcome, Reynaldo and Jorge.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Yes, so we want to talk about this theme about how can we unlock and share fragmented biodiversity data. And I just wanted to make a short introduction to this. What's the current state in terms of biodiversity data? And as we all know, the pace of data generation is increasing. This is, for example, a publication a couple of years ago from Heberling and colleagues, and they showed using GBIF data that over the last couple of years, there has been a really big increase in terms of biodiversity data that is being generated. And this is across taxonomic groups and geographies and time. And there's, of course, this is aided by new technologies that allow rapid data acquisition and processing. So, for example, the scanning and the extraction of information from historical documents. There have been a couple of sessions about this, I think today already. So if you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. So this is the reality. There's an ever-increasing pace of data generation. It's increasingly easier to get data from biodiversity from the field as well. So how are we using this data? Basically, just a couple of examples of how this is being used. And I'm not sure if you have heard about the Linean and the Wallacean shortfalls. There are other shortfalls as well. But basically, we are covering gaps in terms of the distribution. That will be the Wallacean shortfalls, and gaps in terms of taxonomic, the description of species, groups, and organisms. Of course, this data is being used to inform conservation decision, impact planning, and development. And more recently, we're using this amount of data that is being generated to track advances that the countries have committed to, towards achieving common goals like the common Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. But there are still several challenges that remain. Even though we are generating all this huge amount of data, there are still areas in the world that have none or very limited geographical taxonomic coverage. And this is especially true in biodiversity hotspots. And this is a really nice paper recently by Sharma et al. And depending on what definition you use of data deficiency, but they were considering a threshold of 30 records or below would be considered data deficiency. So irrespective of the groups, plants or mammals or selected group of insects, there will be a 50 to 90% of data deficiency within these groups, which is quite amazing. We are generating lots of data, but there are still lots of groups within this different organisms that have very few records available. So that's something to consider. And the other thing is, which brings us more towards what we are going to discuss today as well, is that there's a lot of data being generated, but it's almost impossible to access. And this has been termed, as you know, as well, gray literature. And this is a paper by Amano and colleagues from 2003. And you can see here, just look at, this is the amount of data generated, biodiversity data generated in English-speaking journals and in non-English speaking journals. And the lighter colors refer to literature that is considered gray literature. And this can be reports, internal reports from companies or environmental impact assessment companies and stuff like that. So there's a huge amount of data that is being generated, which is still in this gray literature format, which is practically or nearly impossible to access. So, of course, there's also challenges in terms of technical limitations to, once we have the data, to process it, to analyze and share it. There are lots of new technologies or newer technologies that generate tons of gigabytes of data, camera traps and acoustic recorders and stuff like that. But you need a certain training to analyze and understand and process that data. So that's another one of the challenges. So we want to hear a couple of solutions, or we are going to hear a couple of solutions, or how different groups have been addressing these challenges. And I would just want to name a few of them. Of course, one thing is we would propose to digitize small biodiversity holders. There are in the tropics and our experience in South America, for instance, there are several smaller herbaria and natural history collections which have not digitized the data. And of course, those data are not available for larger analysis. And the other thing is that it will be really great that this huge amount of data that is being generated by environmental assessments and compensation schemes within different countries, when development occurs, that the biodiversity data that are being generated within these processes are shared and integrated into these larger biodiversity databases. And of course, it will be interesting to also take advantage of the existing processing platforms. You know, there have been a couple of talks about eBird and iNaturalist already. And there are several tools that we can use to process this data and reduce or eliminate the existing technical barriers that are there. And we would also propose that it will be good to ensure that we can that the existing data processing platforms can be integrated with biodiversity repositories so that we can use that information. So basically, that's what I just wanted to share. A couple of things. We are going to hear a couple of experiences from our presenters later on. Jorge, I'm not sure if you want to say a couple of words as well.
Gracias, Reinaldo. Voy a hablar en español. Voy a hablar en español, ¿cierto? Sí, ok. Sí, o sea que uno de los problemas más fundamentales de esto también es pensar en que esta literatura gris la estamos agrupando bajo una sola categoría, pero realmente hay varios tipos de literatura gris, ¿no? Hay literatura gris que viene de trabajos de investigación, por ejemplo, muy básicos a nivel de tesis, de pregrado, maestría, buscas doctorado. Pero también está toda esta literatura gris que viene de estudios de impacto ambiental, de IAS. Entonces ahí la proveniencia de los datos también es un aspecto muy fundamental en tratar de entender cómo, cómo, cómo liberamos estos datos para que puedan ser usados. Mucho más fácil de hacerlo a nivel académico, cuando los datos vienen de academia que cuando vienen de empresas privadas. Y la otra cosa es que también, digamos, el trabajo también eh, eh, tomar ventaja de las plataformas existentes es un problema también de capacitación, tanto a los dos niveles, ¿sí? Y mi experiencia es que muchas de las compañías que hacen estudios de impacto ambiental están un poco reacias a compartir los datos en el futuro. Y eso es un problema que, digamos, tendríamos que ver cómo podemos como a través de un acercamiento un poco más estructurado a que esto es información que es importante para ellos también, para su bottom line, digamos, es útil para todos nosotros. Entonces, con eso yo quiero como darle la palabra a Jimena para que presente a los...
Okay. Just a friendly reminder that we're switching between smoothly, I guess, between Spanish and English. So have ready your QRs at hand and have your translations, because we're going to be switching, and even the talks that we're going to hear are going to be some in English and some in Spanish. So our first presentation is going to be is a recording. This is from Antonio Tobar from Peru, and it's in Spanish, and the title is "The Rise and Fall of the Center for Data for Conservation in Peru."
En los 80 se crearon varios centros de datos para la conservación en Latinoamérica, siguiendo el modelo de los programas de patrimonio natural de Estados Unidos, como oficinas especializadas en acopio, sistematización y sobre todo análisis de datos sobre especies y ecosistemas amenazados. En mayo de 1983 se creó el Centro de Datos para la Conservación en la Universidad Nacional Agraria La Molina, el CDC Perú, el mismo que generó bases de datos sobre registros de especies, reportes del estado de conservación, áreas protegidas, entre otros. El CDC se concentró en 3 campos principales: diversidad de especies de flora y fauna silvestre, diversidad de ecosistemas terrestres y acuáticos, y áreas naturales protegidas. Inicialmente, The Nature Conservancy apoyó técnica y financieramente las operaciones de este y otros centros de datos, pero luego cada organización tuvo que buscar los recursos necesarios ejecutando proyectos específicos por encargo de terceros, evaluaciones biológicas, planes ecorregionales de conservación, base de datos de manejo de especies, mapas de vegetación, entre otros. Posteriormente, a inicios de este siglo, los centros de datos se organizaron en la red de Latinoamérica y el Caribe de NatureServe, aunque cada uno mantuvo su autonomía administrativa y financiera. Los objetivos del Centro de Datos del Perú consideran proporcionar información de alta calidad en forma permanente sobre diversidad biológica del Perú, como base para la toma de decisiones en el sector del manejo de los recursos naturales, así como servir de nexo entre los sectores que producen información y aquellos que deben utilizarla, especialmente cuando es necesario tomar decisiones que afectan el estado de los recursos naturales del Perú, es decir, servir un puente entre los investigadores y los que toman las decisiones. La base de datos incluyen el archivo de elementos, el archivo de localización de elementos, el archivo de áreas protegidas, archivos de fuentes bibliográficas, cartografía digital, entre otros. Así, el Centro de Datos para la Conservación de Perú localizaba geográficamente los lugares donde existe alta diversidad de especies o ambientes naturales de importancia. Para ello, analizaba y procesaba la información que se produce sobre la diversidad natural, manteniendo un banco de datos permanentemente actualizado, generando así estudios, informes, propuestas y diversas salidas de información. Esta información era puesta a disposición de instituciones públicas y privadas, bancos de desarrollo e inversión, empresas, organizaciones no gubernamentales, universidades y otros. A lo largo de 35 años, el Centro de Datos para la Conservación de Perú produjo decenas de informes técnicos, mapas de ecosistemas y cerca de 40.000 récords de ocurrencia de especies amenazadas. Parte de estos datos fueron subidos a la plataforma GBIF hace algunos años, pero una porción significativa aún necesita ser publicada. Lamentablemente, el CDC tuvo que cerrar sus operaciones al no poder cubrir sus presupuestos, en especial debido a la crisis económica, la competencia con otras organizaciones y las prioridades de las potenciales fuentes de financiamiento, más sensibles a los temas sociales y el cambio climático que a los ambientales o de diversidad biológica. Actualmente se está buscando actualizar y publicar en línea la base de datos para disponibilidad de todos. Agradezco a varias instituciones que nos han apoyado a lo largo de los años. Son decenas de instituciones, pero principalmente quiero hoy día mencionar a la Universidad Nacional Agraria de La Molina, a The Nature Conservancy, a NatureServe y al Smithsonian Institution. Muchas gracias por su atención.
About how we help link development projects and improve with sorry, this is the Prolongi project. It's a project where we transport gas. We transport gas from the Amazon region in Peru and Cusco. We take it from another project in Ayacucho. We transport it to the coast, and where we liquefy this gas, taking it to minus 162 degrees, reducing its volume to 600 times. So it allows us to transport it from the marine terminal to Asia and Europe. This project had some huge challenges in Peru because we have these complex habitats from 0 meters above sea level to almost 5,000 meters above sea level, with complex diversity areas. And we have also these hotspots in the challenges were how to avoid these areas. So we use the mitigation hierarchy, avoidance, minimization, and restoration of offsetting. So the project focuses on the coastal area with choosing different alternatives with the areas with the less biodiversity, and in the Andean region, avoiding areas with the habitats related to water. So high-Andean wetland bufedales, and kind of wetlands, also creeks. So all this process led us to be in the coast in areas with open seas, rough currents. So we had to construct a breakwater. And from the beginning of the construction of the breakwater, you see the birds started to thrive. The biodiversity started to grow in the area with fish and other species from the area, making this its new habitat. And also in the Andean region, we had to do with already said the avoidance of the wetlands areas and with minimization, and we started the restoration of the habitats with natural plants. You can see here, it's a paper of the quantification of the mitigation hierarchy, if you want to check it. And so it's all documented. So this was the big challenge. And also we started from this time, a collaboration with the Smithsonian. We named it the Biodiversity Monitoring and Assessment Program. This is a new model of collaboration because it's a research agreement study where Smithsonian owns all the data of the monitor. So they have the access to it, they produce it, and they can do whatever they want with the data. Not the company who says you can produce this or you can do that. So it's open. And that's the most important part of this agreement. So because the aim of the Smithsonian is to produce knowledge. And also it's a part of our culture to produce these best practices and to show to other companies how we are doing this. The Biodiversity Monitoring Assessment Program also makes environmental compliance with our monitorings, and it's based in the design of protocols with scientific questions, aiming to reduce the impacts of the project. And we can also detect early the impacts that can be that will happen in the future, all to reduce our footprints. All this information has been gathered in one book in 2013. This is from the pipeline from the Andean region, early monitoring, so the results from until that year. We have also been sorry, the presentation. Salió. So we have been producing a lot of information with the collaboration, more than 30 papers. Check that in the web page. We have also been producing field guides that are deposited in the field museum. And also a lot of outreach and presentation in different events, showing best practices and the information we were producing and ways to improve the reach of the data. This also has helped with national guidelines. Through all this presentation with the Peruvian Ministry of Environment, 2 years ago, they produced a guideline to implement the mitigation hierarchy, citing us for the biodiversity monitoring, application of the mitigation hierarchy. So all this data has also been producing some guidelines from the government, and we're happy to have this. One example from this outreach, we made an agreement with the IMARPE, which is the Peruvian Marine Institute, to develop a biodiversity index for the marine environment for top-bottom substrate. This is an index that was developed in Europe, but we helped them produce the index adapted to Peru, or the central and south coast. This was produced in 2019, and we made it was published with the data from the Institute of the Peruvian Marine Institute. And in 2023, we made a paper with our data, with this guideline that they produced. This is another project that we had with this was the Humboldt penguins. From the construction of the breakwater, many birds and other species started to arrive. Penguin was one of them. The plant was constructed in 2008. And we started to see penguins in 2012. We weren't monitoring them specifically from monitoring other species. We started to see them in bigger numbers every time. We started monitoring them with drones in 2015. And we started to see a growth in the population. By 2019, we approached the national census, and they were able to make it in 2020 and use our data. And by 2020, our colony was the biggest in Peru. And this data was used also in the habitat viability assessment that was later used by IUCN. We still saw a growth with the penguin population, and we have seen a decline in these years after El Niño and the avian flu. But that's sad. This thing is happening all over Peru and Chile. We're still monitoring this. And we're helping from this decline that we're seeing. We have helped with the government. And right now, we're developing the National Conservation Plan for the Humboldt penguin and the sea otter. With the data, we hope it will be finished by this year or year. These are some papers about penguins. These are 2 examples of how we have reached to the government or institutions to use our data. That's all for now. Thanks to Smithsonian.
Okay, our next presentation is gonna be recorded. It's by Tricia Moriarty. It's called Building a Biodiversity Data Aggregator to Improve Accessibility for Decision Making.
Reduce the risks associated with this in the regulatory space, which saw the establishment of the Biodiversity Information Office and the development of Western Australia's biodiversity data repository called DANDU. So a major challenge for our project was the fragmented data landscape caused by complex data supply chains, which had a flow-on effect to data quality. Fragmented landscapes can be caused when there are multiple sources, creating and capturing data, where there's distributed ownership and management across sectors, and a siloed data infrastructure, which means there are multiple points of processing and double handling, and duplication caused by having to map and transform data. And also poor metadata, which may result in loss of provenance and contribute to uncertainty and reduce the trust in the data. So the driver for our project was the need to streamline pipelines in the supply chain with the aim of improving availability and discoverability to facilitate reuse, improve accessibility through the application of standards, and to improve usability through embedded data quality processes that relied on authoritative resources. So contributing to the fragmented landscape in Western Australia is the large number of participants or stakeholders that are involved in the environmental assessment process for proposed developments, and the need to share and on-share data and information between them. Proponents and their consultants need to collate and undertake flora fauna surveys, which are then submitted to government to be used and accessed by numerous agencies as they perform their regulatory functions. This pattern of use and reuse and the need to manage the sensitivities around identified threatened or priority species or privacy concerns can make for complex data flows, introducing a lot of friction and potential inefficiencies, which flow on and affect the broader regulatory process. To the aim of improving data sharing, the Biodiversity Information Office was established as a dedicated resource to manage the data and ensure it was treated as a strategic asset. It has built a centralised repository and is populating it with data. We've incorporated quality assurance through the curation of both the biodata and the taxonomy. And the platform is to be integrated with the state and federal environmental data supply chain to support policies and other decisions around conservation and land management. A key success factor, I think, was establishing the office separately with the sole focus to provide a point of aggregation. So it wasn't an additional responsibility added to a business unit that may have had competing priorities. So the challenge we have now is, though, to ensure that this platform is inserted into the existing complex digital infrastructure and pipelines. So our application DANDU was launched in 2022, and the name is a local indigenous word from the Noongar language group, meaning together, and it reflects DANDU's role as an aggregator. Its purpose is to provide a single point of discovery for all data from all sectors, and by extension, a centralised platform for its curation and long-term preservation. It's designed to integrate with the other government platforms such as the federal BDR, the state government environment online platform, and the state taxonomic authority systems. So Dandrew is a management system, not just a web portal, and it covers the four core functions, allowing for the ingestion processes that include transformation and mapping of data to Dandrew's data models and national standards, curation, quality assurance built in through scripted workflows and complemented by manual intervention by science officers, delivery, the ability to filter and view the data before downloading, and the long-term preservation that maintains appropriate access constraints. Supporting the data quality validation is an internal taxonomic name register, an application we call NOMOS. It's also an aggregator, sourcing data from the authoritative agencies who have the taxonomic expertise. But NOMOS plays a critical role for ensuring accurate species identification, consistent data integration, so linking species across systems, legal and policy alignment, supporting state and federal legislation, threatened species lists and planning, and tracking taxonomic changes, so managing the updates when the species names or classifications change. So I'd just like to finish by acknowledging the many, many people and partners who have been involved in realising this vision to build Western Australia's biodiversity data repository. Thank you.
Practice on biodiversity using causal inference.
I'm going to stand right here. Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Wenwenji, as you nicely pronounce it, or VJ for simplicity, which I usually use. So I'm from the Department of Information and Technology, and also from the Department of Organismal Biology from Uppsala University in Sweden. Today, I'm happy to show present my research about how to quantify the impacts of forestry practices on biodiversity using causal inference methods, which bridges two fields, causal inference and biodiversity modeling. So why does it matter then, right? As you guys probably know, biodiversity is important because it's important to maintain the health of an ecosystem and also for proper ecosystem functioning. But to what extent do human intervention has an effect, for example, like forestry, on biodiversity, which is not really well understood and also very complex, as you can see. So to get a full understanding of human interventions on biodiversity, we apply causal inference methods. So to facilitate the studies, we use the Sweden's National Forestry Inventory, or Riksskogstaxeringen. It's a mouthful. I'm still trying to get used to it. It's one of the unique inventories that is one of the oldest and also a still continuous forest inventory that started in 1923 and it's still ongoing now. It consists of plots throughout the whole of Sweden. I'm not sure if you can see it here. There's about 10,000 of them dotted throughout Sweden. And this inventory contains not only forestry practice informations, species inventories, biotic, and also abiotic features as well. So here in the inventory, they mostly focus on these groups: shrubs, mosses, lichens, grasses, and trees. So biodiversity in this sense means these groups. To measure the state of biodiversity, I chose two metrics. So these two are the ones I chose: species richness and also geometric mean abundance. So species richness just basically shows us how many species are there. While geometric mean abundance shows us how population changes, how population abundance changes across species. So because of time limitations, I will only show you the effects of felling on biodiversity. To account for systematic errors within the studies, we have applied causal inference. So what does that mean? So if you imagine if you have a felling group where trees will be cut down, imagine that it could have more tree plots with trees that are older in age, and vice versa if you have a control group where you don't have as much plots with older trees, for example, because it just makes economic sense, right? But we don't want to compare. So when we look at the effects of felling on biodiversity, we don't want to look at the effects of, for example, plots with loads of old trees with plots that have not that much old trees, right? So then we need to balance this proportion. So to do this, we can apply the method propensity weighted average causal effect. Mouthful, but basically what we do is we use inverse probability weighting, which is just we give more weights for the proportions of plots that are smaller, and vice versa, we give less weights for the plots that are larger in proportions, so that we can balance this. And the figures on the right shows the effects of felling on biodiversity for the two biodiversities, while we account for the systematic errors. So here we can see that felling had a drastic reduction in the mean abundance of the species. This makes sense because if you were to do felling, your target species would be reduced. So this makes sense. For the species richness, however, it's a bit unexpected because when you did felling, you're not expecting the species richness to increase. But however, this observation is also seen in other studies as well. So what could be happening here then, if you are wondering? So we think that the effects of felling actually introduces colonizing species. So what I mean is that if you have felling, then it would open up niches for other colonizing species to enter into the field, and then that could potentially increase the numbers of species within the plots. Apart from that, within causal inference, we can also stratify results. So based on the features of the plots. So what that means is that, for example, if you want to look at the effects of felling on biodiversity, but also accounting for the plots that are only containing old trees and also plots that have only young trees. So you want to see how felling affects these two different types of plots, which you can do. So on the right, it shows exactly that using causal inference. So here we can see that on the mean abundance and the species richness, if we take into account the age of the trees, felling, the effects of felling is drastically different. And the difference can be up to 2 to even 4 times the difference in magnitude. So in conclusion, causal inference not only can allow us to account for systematic errors arising from plot features when we study the effects of felling on biodiversity, it can also allow us to stratify causal effects based on plot features so that we can have finer analysis into how things work. Here, I only show you one aspect of the forestry practice, but to get a full picture of how the whole forestry management could affect biodiversity, you would have to include all the different aspects of forestry practices, also implementing causal inference, so that you get a less systematic, error-prone image of the effects of forestry management on biodiversity. And with that, I would like to thank all the people that helped me throughout my journey here. and also for all of you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we were planning for this session. It's to, at the end of these presentations, we have 4 burning questions, and we have Bruno, and we have Ricardo Ortiz, and we have Angelica, and of course we have and we have all of you as well. So what we want is basically capitalize that we have people that has a lot of experience, either for the private sector and the academic sector, working with GPs, with the Columbia System Information of Biodiversity, to help us, get a little bit more of information on how we move forward, particularly in countries that have biodiversity, but the data hasn't been available. And one of the motivations, for Reynaldo and myself coming from Peru, and from Jorge coming from Colombia, was looking the contrasting experiences that both countries have had over the years, to mobilize and organize the information in Colombia that has like more than 2 decades, I think, versus Peru that it's moving towards, building their system of information on biodiversity, but also, trying to increase the data that it's in the data. So I asked Antonio, I think is in the chat, but I asked Antonio to sort of reflect on the first question that he, coming from the CDC and being one of the directors of the CDC over those 35 years. So what lessons he learned about this, and what things they could have done better to avoid, that the CDC disappeared, and with that, they didn't finally mobilize all the data from GBs. And talking about 35 years is not, 5 years old, right? It's a lot of data biodiversity. So I don't know how to do this, but do you have any recommendation? I mean, we can have some chairs front, yes? And I have Antonio's answer he sent me a message with his answer for the first questions, but I would like to have Bruno to answer the second, and Ricardo and Angelica working on the third question, and feel free to work on the last one. And if you have experiences that you want to share with us, that's more than welcome. So, okay, so I start with Antonio. And his answer. So for the first question about how can experiences like the CDC and other initiatives for collecting biodiversity data be prevented where funding and institutional priorities change. And Antonio said that part of the CDC problem is that they rested on, they rested on their fame and their reputation, in the sense that they were always sought out to carry out projects or studies, since for years they were an important reference point for databases, information, and mapping on Peruvian biodiversity. And they didn't strengthen on fundraising capabilities. So in other words, they were very good technicians, but poor managers. And they always had the idea of having a board or a council to guide the decisions and actions of the technical component, and also support fundraising. but they were unsuccessful in their approaches to institutions like Profonampe or the National Park Service. So an external board made up organizations that require or might require access to timely, high quality information on biodiversity. Specifically, the idea was for the CDC to be the technical arm of the Profonampe. In Profonampe in Peru, it's a branch that supports funding administration for organizations, particularly for the Park Service, but also from some other government organizations. So they wanted to be something similar to the World Conservation Monitoring Center. So another idea they always propose, wherever they have been given the opportunities to create biodiversity data centers in the regions or Department of Peru. That's one of their proposals, based on partnerships between regional governments or local universities and non-governmental organizations or businesses that develop regional biodiversity databases, specialized libraries, thematic cartography, and even zoological and botanical collections. Their priority right now is to recover all the information they generated over 35 years, databases above all, and make it available online to anyone who needs it. To this end, they were in talks with several people who can guide them and even help them secure funding. So what lesson learned? They said that the CDC Peru always resisted getting involved in the issue of climate change, and as its strengths laid in natural diversity. And this was a mistake, as valuable opportunities for funding, diversification of interest, and multidisciplinary work and capacity building were lost taking this decision. Well, I don't know if it waiting and has some comment about that. Yes.
O sea, me parece que estos retos que él describe son como los retos que son recurrentes en el mundo del monitoreo de la biodiversidad, que es fácil montar cosas al principio porque es nuevo y porque es interesante, pero después mantener esa continuidad es muy difícil. Y pues creo que hay que pensar tratando de volver al problema de los datos que son difíciles de conseguir, es tratar de ajustar modelos de negocios que puedan mantener este tipo de estrategias y al mismo tiempo descubrir esos datos que están ocultos. Pero me parece que muchas veces estos programas se montan con la expectativa de que van a durar muchos años sin haber hecho esa planeación estratégica al principio de entender cuáles son las limitantes, cómo van a crecer los datos, una cantidad de cosas. Pues habiendo montado un plan de plataformas de biodiversidad, me he dado cuenta que que hay soluciones, pero que hay que planearlo y hay que tenerlo en cuenta desde el principio.
Thank you, Jorge. For the second question, what models of collaboration between academic, government, private sector, and local and indigenous communities have worked to generate and share biodiversity data? I wanted to ask Bruno to provide his perspective and experience on this.
I'm going to answer in Spanish. Sí, voy a ir en español. De todas maneras, bueno, el modelo que hemos trabajado en el Smithsonian, pero en el Smithsonian ha servido bastante. Es un modelo, no hay muchos así, pero digamos, a veces la reunión entre la academia y el sector privado es un poco más sencillo. Hay mucha dificultad. Trabajar con el Estado es bastante más difícil. No porque no quiera, sino que a veces el tiempo es muy limitado para él. Tiene mucho cumplimientos y tienen tiempo para trabajar las cosas. Y luego en Perú tenemos, pues, por el tema político hay muchos cambios y a veces eso da que haya mucha más complicación. Pues es un escenario complejo ahí, pero a veces hay que estar detrás, que las cosas salgan rápido, antes de que haya un cambio de identidad, y cuando se deja a veces eso funciona. puede hacer. En el sector privado entre sí a veces hay temas de egos, pero es muy fácil pasar, pero una vez que uno logra explicar el propósito adecuado del uso de los datos y cómo beneficia a todos, se puede, ¿no? Y puede generar mejores fondos y para financiar puestas a largo plazo. Entonces, a veces ahí funciona bastante mejor, ¿no? Y se puede hacer en conjunto con el Estado y con las entidades académicas. Con comunidades, el reto siempre es el tema de confianza. Hay que empezar desde el inicio, claros. También ser bastante rápidos con la información, porque a veces las comunidades tienden a tener intereses que varían, que van cambiando con el tiempo. Puede pasar con un proyecto que está, pero si uno pierde el enganche, se van a perder. Hay que estar, hay que estar en comunicación permanente. Y ahí tienes el tema que luego a veces cambian diferentes comunidades y ahí es el enganche porque cada dirigente político puede tener un interés diferente. Eso es lo que a veces hay que involucrar muchas más personas dentro de una comunidad, no solo a veces. Entonces, pero sí, existen muchos modelos que sirven, ¿no? Programas muy poderosos hace algunos años y funcionan bastante bien. Entonces, hay muchos modelos que se pueden aplicar en.
Thank you, Bruno. Somebody, okay, just raise your hands if you wanna add some ideas to these questions. So yes, please.
Sí, quería complementar la respuesta también con el uso de los datos. Siento que las empresas, sobre todo en este momento, pues también les interesa que pueda usar los datos y eso también se ve como una herramienta para engancharlos en la publicación. Y a veces es lo difícil. Hacer que ellos publiquen no es, pues no siempre es sencillo, pero es como una bola de nieve. Una vez uno entra, es cada vez más sencillo. Y de acuerdo con el tema de las comunidades, pero nuevamente vuelvo a que para ellos también es importante saber cómo lo van. El punto central para que continúen poderle dar.
Bueno, y agregar que es importante hacer una lectura profunda de el por qué los datos en biodiversidad son importantes. Y eso significa identificar los co-beneficios que pueden existir de la publicación de esos datos. Y de esa forma reconocer que esa infraestructura común que puede existir a través de estas plataformas globales como DIVIF, pues terminan siendo beneficios para todo el mundo. Y eso ayuda a que luego la narrativa de conversación entre todos los países, entre todos los actores, sea mucho más sencilla. Esto así parece fácil, pero en realidad es un gran reto llegar a comprender esto y llevarlo desde las comunidades locales hasta las organizaciones o la empresa privada que podría financiar estas estrategias.
Thank you, Angelica. And so just to let you know, Angelica, she's a researcher at the Humboldt Institute. She's a biologist with a master's degree in biological sciences and a PhD in biology. She has experience in conservation biogeography, habitat trapping, adaptation to the presence of felines, promoting the use of conservation technologies, research and promotion of protection production systems, and communication and collaboration science. I'm sorry that I didn't introduce you before. I think that was a better idea. So for the third question, I wanted to ask Ricardo and Angelica to give us their perspective. So given the diversity of data types, like local ecological knowledge or environmental impact assessments, what standards and best practices can help data interoperability without compromising ownership and cultural context?
Vale, yo creo que es una pregunta difícil porque es como dos ramas que están como contrapuestas la una a la otra, ¿no? Como por un lado el sector empresarial y otro pues el trabajo en las comunidades locales y tienen diferentes avances, ¿no? Entonces, como les decía, con el sector privado, ellos también tienen intereses ahorita, por ejemplo, en Europa está el Green Deal. Entonces, ellos necesitan empezar a publicar datos. También están los países que están comenzando como pioneros dentro del TNFD. Entonces, ellos tienen un interés en aportar datos para poder construir indicadores que les permitan mejorar. Y pues tenemos ahorita un marco global con una meta 15 que también los impulsa específicamente a ellos a publicar los datos y generan, por ejemplo, aquí en Colombia, pues tienen su hoja de ruta biodiversidad y desarrollo en la que pues se fijaron su meta para participar y aportar dentro de esa meta. Entonces, ellos, digamos aquí en el contexto de Colombia, pues ya están muy montados en ese bus de publicar datos. Y yo creo que, y ha sido como un trabajo que hemos hecho también de la mano de GIVIP con algunos proyectos de fortalecimiento de capacidad, sumarlos a esas iniciativas de publicar datos, mostrarles los beneficios, cómo aportan esas metas que ellos tienen. Entonces, eso va por ese lado, pero algo que ha sido fundamental en ese aspecto es que la relación de las empresas se hace a través de un instituto de investigación que aloja un sistema de información. Entonces eso les da, es diferente quizás esa forma de verlo que si lo hacen directamente con el ministerio. En Colombia tenemos los dos casos y la relación es completamente diferente, porque por uno tienen una obligatoriedad y por el CIP Colombia lo hacen como desde un punto de vista más, como qué beneficios tenemos de publicar datos. Esto es bueno, la empresa tiene reconocimiento, entonces es muy positivo. Entonces eso ha permitido, hace unos días tuvimos la reunión de gobierno de GIVIF y ellos nos mostraban las cifras y nos decían, hay 120 empresas publicando datos en GIVIF y 60 son de Colombia. Y la estrategia ha sido esa. La estrategia ha sido ir por las empresas, mostrándoles los beneficios y sobre todo algo fundamental es que en Colombia tenemos una asociación nacional de empresarios, la ANDI. Eso ha sido fundamental porque uno llega a una empresa y está dentro de su naturaleza ser competitivos. Entonces, cuando una empresa publica, la otra dice, pero ¿por qué él sí y yo no? Entonces, yo tengo que publicar. Y tenemos un top 10 de empresas publicado en la página. Y ustedes vieran la cantidad de peticiones de, por favor, ya publiqué un conjunto de datos, actualíceme el top 10 para ver si ya llegué. Se han hecho premiaciones, o sea, para reconocer el trabajo, porque es un trabajo enorme. Y otro dato importante es cerca de antes, cuando comenzó esto en el 2019, gracias a un proyecto promovido por GIVIP, el 0.14, 0.15, no recuerdo bien, de los datos provenían de empresas. En este momento el 33% casi de los datos provienen de empresas. Entonces el crecimiento es exponencial. Entonces ahí es donde uno valora toda esta información que proviene de las evaluaciones de impacto ambiental. Eso en verdad está generando datos, sino que se están quedando ocultos. Entonces, ese es el camino con las empresas que vemos, pero por el otro lado está el tema de los datos de comunidades, ¿cierto? Entonces eso está a estar arrancando. De hecho, en este mismo espacio hace un par de horas estaba discutiendo los local context para poder etiquetarlo, porque para ellos es muy importante que se reconozca el uso de datos de las comunidades. Y es algo que va en proceso. Entonces, como para cerrar esa respuesta, yo diría que el estándares hay y los estándares están cambiando. Lo que hemos visto también en estos días con Tadwick y con GBIF es los datos se están volviendo cada vez más complejos de los estándares. Aunque el estándar no cambia mucho, se le agregan elementos, pero el modelo de los datos cambia. Ahora tenemos un Darwin Core Data Package, tenemos un CAMTRAP DP, tenemos, o sea, formas más efectivas de compartir los datos sin que se pierda información. Eso está cambiando. Pero lo que mantiene esto funcionando es que funcionamos como una red. Entonces, quizás es no reinventar la rueda, ya hay muchos mecanismos que están andando y que son promovidos por una red de personas, organizaciones, revisiones públicas de los estándares. Entonces, antes de empezar a inventar algo, yo creo que es meterse en esa, pues directamente lo diré como pues entrar en este círculo de GIF que les va a permitir tener también portales hosteados que les permiten visualizar los datos a nivel nacional. Entonces, hay muchas herramientas ya andando, están motivando el cambio en los estándares. Entonces, yo creo que esa podría ser como una estrategia también. Y ahora sí.
Ricardo lo ha dicho todo. Pero para complementar, algo muy importante también es, si bien los estándares existen, los métodos, las formas de publicar es necesario traducir eso a un lenguaje consumible para una empresa y para una comunidad. Y ahí viene el otro reto, y es cómo logramos que esas empresas entiendan que esto puede ser sencillo si se hace bien. Generamos protocolos, generamos procesos automatizados, buscamos que todo se vuelva un clic para que esos procesos estén menos susceptibles de error, porque también sabemos que es muy fácil cometer errores construyendo bases de datos, pero cómo podemos reducir esas posibilidades de error a través de buenos métodos, de automatización de procesos. Y con las comunidades locales, empezar a construir desde cero, desde hacerlos coparticipativos, ¿cierto? No es nosotros llegamos a la comunidad a decirles que tenemos que hacer esto, sino que a partir del interés de las comunidades, que siempre hay intereses que están relacionados con biodiversidad, para aportar nuevos registros biológicos que nos ayuden a sumar a estos inventarios, a estas estrategias de monitoreo de biodiversidad.
Thank you very much, Ricardo and Angelica. That was amazing. And so for the last question, yes, how to ensure that data truly informs development, investment, and conservation plans in an integrated manner? Can I ask any of you or in the public that wants to give their perspective? How to ensure that data truly informs development, investment, and conservation plans in an integrated manner? Yes, go ahead, Jorge.
Yo he pensado muchísimo en esta pregunta, por eso quiero como hablar un poco de ella, pero depende muchísimo, es la respuesta corta, depende muchísimo. Porque para quién es el desarrollo y la inversión y los planes de conservación. Todas esas tres cosas, primero, son dos cosas diferentes. Segundo, se pueden aplicar a diferentes niveles, desde una comunidad local hasta un país o el mundo. Entonces, yo creo que lo que es clave es que cuando se colectan los datos, la escala más pequeña es la escala local. Esa es la escala a la que se puede hacer las primeras inferencias y a las que se puede hacer se puede informar el valor de los datos para conservación. Y si estoy comparando, por ejemplo, el trabajo que mostraron hoy de forestry, donde la práctica de simplemente cosechar árboles tiene un efecto sobre la biodiversidad y esa práctica se está haciendo a un nivel local, en un sitio que es para extracción, entonces eso va a informar, bueno, qué práctica es mejor y cómo lo hacemos, etc. Pero también puede ser una comunidad que está cazando en parte de su territorio porque por métodos tradicionales tienen esa cultura y entonces quieren demostrar que esa caza no tiene un efecto. Entonces, de nuevo, al nivel local. Ahora, la cosa se complica una vez uno empieza a subir de escala y es porque hay que empezar a agregar datos y en ese sentido es cuando plataformas como GB pueden ayudar muchísimo a que los datos, si están ahí, estén todos armonizados para poder empezar a hacer esas preguntas más a nivel regional. Pero yo lo que creo es que depende, es un reto muy grande porque tenemos guías, tenemos los indicadores de la Convención de la Biodiversidad Biológica, del plan bueno, se me olvidó el nombre, el CUMIN Montreal. Ahí están los indicadores, pero hay muy pocas guías de cómo llegar a calcular esos indicadores. Entonces los países tienen estos retos donde, por ejemplo, tienen todos estos datos y no saben cómo calcular el indicador de cambios en las tendencias de poblaciones, por ejemplo. No todo el mundo tiene un Humboldt en su país. Sí, es cierto que el Humboldt, digamos que hace ese proceso porque fue construido especialmente para eso, pero no en todas partes es igual. Entonces, ¿cómo se aprende de esas experiencias de otros institutos, etcétera, y cómo se traen esos resultados a nivel global? Y pues en toda la mitad está todo el resto gris, que hemos venido hablando de esto, donde está toda esa información ahí que podría ser utilizada, cómo la sacamos de ese como hueco en donde está y la tratamos de usar y la integramos a todos esos niveles diferentes. La información puede estar gris a nivel local, puede estar gris a nivel regional, a todos los niveles. Y pues es un reto muy grande. Pero, y bueno, y lo último que quiero decir es que las comunidades, y esto yo creo que es algo que, que no estamos haciendo suficiente énfasis, las comunidades son la base de todo. No son, no son los que van a sacar los datos para nosotros hacer cosas. Ellos son como el principio. El principio de todo el proceso está ahí. Y yo creo que hemos cometido el error de que llegamos como científicos a un sitio y que no, que vamos a ver qué especies tienen y que vamos a ver qué no, no. Y ellos ya saben qué especies tienen. Ellos ya saben. Lo que necesitan es demostrarlo. Y entonces nosotros tenemos la tecnología, tenemos los métodos, tenemos los protocolos. Entonces es simplemente coger esa información, hacer capacitación, desarrollar herramientas que sean suficientemente asequibles a las comunidades para poder usar, tener como el buy-in de las comunidades. Y de ahí arranca un proceso desde abajo que se va agregando a medida que subimos las escalas. Entonces ya, me voy a callar porque si no aquí sigo 2 horas.
Okay, well, no, thank you very much. I mean, we've run out of time. And I thought it was going to be a short session. So thank you very much. I mean, I hope this gives you a glimpse into the challenges that, we have. The idea was, again, to try to bridge the experience of Peru, the needs of Peru with the experience of Colombia. And we're actually talking with the guys from the Humboldt and then GBIF, and I hope the next time we present a session like this, we're going to have some advances in Peru, and hopefully advances on all the things we touched today. So thank you very much.
Just a quick announcement. Remember that today we have the poster session in the first